it was generally a better idea.
Yeah,
So you'd give in to each other.
yeah.
It was time, really. The reason all of us in the Beatles shied away from Beatles material directly after the breakup.
It was a natural pause, really. The reason we and the Beatles stepped back from our material right after the split. When people think of Paul McCartney, they picture the charismatic Beatle with melodic bass lines and a boyish grin, a songwriter whose pen gave us Yesterday and whose vision helped redefine popular music.
You think that people would have had enough of silly love songs?
But behind the knighthood and warm persona lies a man with strong opinions about his musical peers. While Sir Paul has kept a mostly diplomatic public image, those close to him have seen moments when his charm gave way to sharp critiques of bands. That didn't meet his high standards. Paul can be brutally candid about music. Former Wings guitarist Denny Lane shared in a 2018 interview, "There was always this friendly rivalry between us, pushing each other to top the last idea. He knows what he loves and what he doesn't, and he's not shy about saying it privately." From tense exchanges during the British invasion to dismissive remarks about punk rockers who challenged his legacy, McCartney's private views reveal a competitive streak fans rarely see. His musical feuds weren't just personal, they reflected deep divides over songwriting philosophy, artistic direction, and the essence of rock music. Today we're counting down the 6 bands Paul McCartney reportedly couldn't stand, and why even some of music's biggest names felt the sting of the cute Beatles' less than charming critiques. The Bee Gees kicking off at number 6 is Paul McCartney's simmering resentment toward the Bee Gees, sparked during the late 1970s disco boom when the Gibb brothers' success eclipsed McCartney's post-Wings career lull. Paul felt ambushed by disco, producer Chris Thomas recalled. Here were these brothers outselling the Beatles with Saturday Night Fever, and he took it personally. McCartney's frustration stemmed from what he saw as the Bee Gees shift from Beatles-esque pop to disco giants. Wings guitarist Lawrence Juber noted Paul would hear their falsetto harmonies and grumble about them abandoning their roots for commercial gain. The tension flared in 1979 when both were recording in the same Miami studio. Studio manager Tony Bongiovi recalled Paul scheduling sessions to avoid the Gibbs, visibly tensing when their latest chart record was mentioned. What particularly irked McCartney was the critical praise they received. He reportedly told bandmates, "They're using the same chords as everyone else, just sped up with a drum machine." While Paul never publicly bashed the Bee Gees, his silence when discussing influential artists spoke volumes. During a 2001 tribute after Morris Gibb's death, McCartney's brief, impersonal statement stood out against others' heartfelt condolences, hinting at lingering competitive wounds.
Always end up alone.
The Monkees at number 5 is Paul McCartney's quiet disdain for the Monkees, a band he allegedly saw as a manufactured mockery of the Beatles' legacy. Paul viewed them as a corporate knockoff. Beatles assistant Alistair Taylor wrote in his memoir. He'd switch the radio off whenever their songs played during studio drives. The Monkees' prefab origins particularly grated on McCartney, who'd honed his craft in Hamburg's gritty clubs. In a 1967 discussion with Brian Epstein, Paul reportedly said, "They're turning our work into a farce. 4 actors posing. As a band, it's insulting." The tension grew when the Monkees TV show adopted psychedelic elements post Sgt. Pepper. George Harrison recalled Paul's irritation, saying he'd get wound up saying they're stealing our ideas without the effort. A notable snub occurred at a 1968 Los Angeles party where McCartney reportedly walked away mid-conversation with Mickey Dolenz, who later said, "I don't think he ever saw us as real musicians." Even as the Monkees gained creative control, Paul's view didn't soften. In a 2011 interview, he diplomatically noted they had catchy songs, but they weren't the Beatles, were they?
I should be on that train and gone. I should be riding on that train to San Antonio.
The Sex Pistols landing at number 4 is Paul McCartney's clash with the Sex Pistols, the punk rock rebels whose 1976 emergence ruffled his feathers. Their raw, chaotic sound and anti-establishment ethos reportedly outraged McCartney, who saw their music as an attack on his legacy. Paul called their sound an assault on his ears. Linda McCartney's brother John Eastman shared in 2003. He couldn't fathom why people celebrated not playing well. The Pistols reciprocated, with Johnny Rotten dismissing Paul as a relic. During the same week, McCartney's Mull of Kintyre topped charts alongside God Save the Queen. What stung most was their direct jabs. Wings drummer Denny Sywell said Paul was hurt when he learned the Pistols used Beatles posters for target practice. The tension peaked in early 1977 at London's AIR studios, where both were recording. Studio manager Dave Harries recalled Paul attempting a friendly greeting, only for Sid Vicious to mutter about sellout establishment. Paul walked away and never acknowledged them again. Years later, he grudgingly admitted Punk cleared the air, but in a 2016 BBC interview, he dismissed the Pistols as "not my thing," with a tone that betrayed deeper feelings. Oasis at number 3 is the Britpop sensation Oasis, whose open worship of the Beatles irritated McCartney more than it flattered him. Paul found their Beatles obsession exhausting and almost offensive, his publicist Jeff Baker said. He felt they reduced his life's work to copied chords and recycled melodies. McCartney was particularly annoyed by Oasis's cocky attitude and what he saw as derivative music. At a 1997 dinner, he reportedly told George Martin, "They've got the swagger, but where's the originality? We didn't just mimic our heroes, we reinvented them." The Gallagher brothers' brash claims, like Noel's 1996 boast that Oasis was bigger than the Beatles, infuriated Paul. Beatles biographer Philip Norman said he called such comparisons absurd and privately labeled the band arrogant upstarts with half the talent. A tense moment came at the 2000 Q Awards, where Liam Gallagher approached Paul for an autograph but received a frosty response. Witnesses describe Paul as polite but visibly uneasy. While Paul later acknowledged Oasis's role in keeping guitar music alive, his 2018 GQ comment, "Good songs, but I wish they'd found their own voice," revealed his lingering critique. The Rolling Stones taking the second spot is the iconic Beatles-Stones rivalry, which went beyond friendly competition to something more personal. While Paul maintained a cordial public face, he took subtle digs at the Rolling Stones over the years. "I always thought the Stones were a blues cover band that hit the jackpot," he allegedly told producer George Martin during a 1968 Abbey Road session. This sentiment surfaced more tactfully in a 2021 New Yorker interview, where Paul said, "They're a blues cover band, really. Our net was cast wider." Mick Jagger retorted, calling the Beatles a four-piece with one drummer, while noting the Stones' ongoing stadium success. Former Apple Records executive Peter Brown revealed Paul felt the Stones trailed the Beatles, mimicking their album concepts months later. The tension spiked in 1969 when John Lennon considered producing a Stones album. Paul was visibly annoyed, per studio engineer Jeff Emmerich, questioning why John would waste time on them. With Beatles projects pending, while Paul has praised select Stones tracks, the rivalry's edge persists. In a 2016 Rolling Stone interview, his diplomatic "they're a great band, but not the Beatles, are they?" carried a subtle sting.
Now everyone talks about, Syosset and Levittown, but I can tell you, Liverpool, there's this really, but they had a record contract, and they had a record in the charts with a bluesy harmonica on it called Love Me Do.
The Beach Boys topping the list is Paul McCartney's intense rivalry with the Beach Boys, a feud that began as mutual admiration but turned bitter between McCartney and Brian Wilson. They were like chess masters. Producer Phil Spector noted, "Each move one made, the other had to outdo. It started friendly, but became an obsession." The rivalry ignited in 1966 when McCartney heard Pet Sounds. Beatles producer George Martin recalled Paul playing it obsessively, saying, "We need to surpass this," which spurred Sgt. Pepper. The relationship soured when Wilson shelved his Smile album amid mental health struggles. Beatles aide Mal Evans said Paul was dismissive, remarking, "If you can't finish what you start, you don't belong in this game. We push through." A 1967 dinner at Wilson's home turned tense when Paul reportedly called some Beach Boys songs simplistic and their harmonies predictable. Beach Boys drummer Dennis Wilson said Paul thought he was offering advice, but Brian was silent for days. Over time, the rivalry grew colder. In a 1993 interview, Paul downplayed the Beach Boys' influence, saying, "Nice harmonies, but people overstate their impact on us." Even when praising God Only Knows, he adds qualifiers like "for American pop," revealing a competitive edge. Historian David Leaf noted, Paul respects Brian but won't admit how much Pet Sounds drove the Beatles forward. And that's our countdown of the 6 bands that got under Paul McCartney's skin. From creative rivalries to personal clashes, even music legends have their nemeses. What do you think of these feuds? Did any surprise you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into rock's untold stories, hit that like button and subscribe for more music history. Don't forget to tap the notification bell so you never miss our weekly uploads.